Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm J-Doragon, and today I'm going to be talking about my general method of TV spreading, somewhat lecture style, and we're going to be talking about basically what I do and the reasons on why I do it specifically. So, a couple of things to note before we start spreading. I highly recommend that you have your 8 Tems picked out, with the general idea of what gears you want to be running on each of your Tems. Temteam is a very good resource for this, and compiling this information with some notes. I'll have a link to this in the description. But before we get into it, you want to ask yourself these couple of questions. What is the role of this Tem? What do I need this Tem to be? And what do I want this Tem to be able to do? So for the role, maybe you want it to be a speedy attacker, maybe it's more of a support, or maybe you just need it to tank hits, to pivot, etc. And also, always remember you have gears. The gears can effectively increase your Tem's TVs or help it do what it needs to be able to do. If you're stuck with this, don't be afraid to experiment. You want to try to find a gear that helps complement these 3 questions. When I'm TV spreading, I always start with the stamina rotation. And basically, why is this? Well, it's just because stamina is the easiest and the most certain stat to calculate for. The question, what do I want this Tem to do, is particularly useful here. Most Tems, they want to click roughly 2 to 4 moves before overexerting, but this kind of depends on the cost of the moves as well as what you want the Tem to do. What our goal is here is to try to find a rotation that's flexible without wasting TVs. So we don't want to invest the maximum stamina to get as many moves as possible, because then we're going to be wasting TVs that we could be spending in other areas. So how does stamina work specifically? Well, I've outlined most common things to note, and there's a couple more I'll mention on top of this, but basically every single Tem in the game is going to have a passive regen of stamina per turn, and this is going to be 1 plus 5%, which is always going to be rounded up. So the common breakpoints I have listed in this chart directly on the right, which is that if your stamina is 41 or higher, you're going to regen 4 per turn, 61, 5, so on and so on. If you add 20 to the bottom, 121, you'll regen 8, and you keep adding 20 for 1 regen. And inversely, you can subtract 20 for 1 less regen. Maybe your Tem is holding Sweatband, which then it will regen 10% at the very start of the turn before moves are selected. So your Tem, the breakpoints, are on the right here in this other chart. And for both of these charts, I've included most of the common breakpoints, the range that your Tem's stamina will be in. Maybe you'll go higher, maybe you'll go lower. It's up to you. But these are the common breakpoints, and you'll regen 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if your stamina is that number or higher. Similarly, resting will give you 15% stamina, and this is always going to be rounded up, and will be on top of your natural passive regen. Maybe your Tem is holding Whip, or your ally is holding Whip. So what Whip does is, the Tem holding Whip, when it swaps in, or if it starts on the field, it's going to give your ally a speed boost, +1 speed, but they will lose 35% of their stamina. And it's important to note that there's a specific interaction that it has with Sweatband, because Whip, no matter what the speeds of your Tems are, Whip will always go first. So if you lead this Tem with a Sweatband user, it will take 35% of their stamina, but then they'll recover 10%. So it will only cost 25% of the stamina. Then there's 2 status conditions that some items can, or moves can inflict on your Tem. Vigorized, which would be commonly from Fake Beard or Bait, makes moves cost half of their stamina rounded up normally. So if I have a move that costs 21 stamina, it'll be 10.5 if they're Vigorized, but then it gets rounded up to 11. Same thing with Exhaust, just it's going to cost 1.5 times more, so this move that costs 21 stamina will cost 50% on top of that, so half of 21 is 10.5. We'll be at 31.5, and that gets rounded up to 32. And a couple of things to note. Prideful works exactly the same as Sweatband if you end up using it, and Matcha, when you rest, you regain 40% of your stamina, and it just rounds normally. Note also that when you overexert at level 100, it will do damage equal to 5 HP per stamina point that you overexert by. So if my Tem has 5 stamina, and I use a move that costs 9 stamina, I'm going to overexert by 4. And 4 times 5 HP is going to leave me at 20 damage. So I will take 20 damage from overexerting. So how do we calculate stamina? Remember, you have gears. This is very important. Maybe one of your Tems has Mom's Lunch, so your ally is always going to be exhausted. Or you have Fake Beard, so it'll reduce the cost of your moves, making your rotation cheaper. But basically, we want to use a specific and flexible rotation that allows us to click these moves without overexerting. But remember, this is very important. You want to keep the investment reasonable. Generally, this might look like somewhere between 0 to 150 TVs in stamina. But it all depends on what you want the Tem to do. So the formula for this is basically just we're going to add up all of the moves in the rotation, the stamina costs of each of them with whatever modifiers. So if I click Fiery Soul, Fiery Soul, Fiery Soul, it's 27 plus 27 plus 27, which is a total of 81 stamina for this rotation. And then in between each of these moves, I'm going to be regaining stamina with my passive regen and maybe Sweatband as well, or Prideful. So then you have to subtract this from the total cost of your rotation, and that will give you the number that you want your stamina to be, and that's what you want to invest for. So an equation basically is just that the stamina you want is the cost of your total rotation minus the regen you get per turn. This is your passive regen, your Sweatband, etc., times the number of moves you click in this rotation minus 1. I'm subtracting 1 here because if I click 3 moves, in between each of these moves, I'm getting my regen. I don't get my regen after the last move, so I'm only going to get 2 of them. The Tem I'm going to use as an example of this is going to be J-Doragon, and it's going to be holding Fake Beard in this case because it has very expensive moves, and it's going to help it get its rotation a lot cheaper. Alright, so here I am in Temteam, and I'm just going to add the J-Doragon into this with the moves I'm going to use, which are going to be Feather Yatling, Turbine, Rockfall, and Stunball for this example, while holding Fake Beard, and I'll just pick Escapist as the trait. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to use this to save my spread in my team while I build it in the damage calculator over here. So I'm going to pick up J-Doragon. So Fake Beard's unique because there's 3 situations you want to calc for, basically, where you have 2 procs of Fake Beard, so you get 2 turns of the Vigorized, where you have 1 because you swapped in, or where you have 0 because you were lunched, or something exhausted you, a move, maybe. So we're going to start with 2 Fake Beard procs, right? So the most expensive rotation I can think of, maybe triple Stunball. So we have 17 plus 17 plus 34, and then I have 3 moves, so minus 2 times, I'm going to assume I want to run 61, it might be 5, it might be 4, we'll start with, just assume 5. Okay, well, I hit the rotation if I'm at 61 or above, so we're good there, we hit that. So let's try for a 4 move rotation. So we'll go with 17 plus 17 plus, yeah, why not, Turbine and Feather Yatling. I should note these 17s are stone balls. So minus then 3, because we have 4 moves, so 3 times 5. And we're at 62. So go back in the damage calculator, and I'm going to invest until I have 62 stamina. So I'm going to go up, and boom. It's not too much investment, only 50. So we're going to play around with this a bit more. But why don't we try a stone ball, maybe rockfall into a stone ball into a turbine. That's a pretty random, expensive cycle. So 17 plus 14, 28, half of that, plus, what do we see, 34 for a stone ball, plus a turbine, so 23, and that's 4 moves, so minus 3 times 5, we end up with 73. I'm going to decide not to go with that because that's pretty expensive. Maybe someone wants to, but I think that's pretty high investment. So we'll stick with 62 for now. And then we'll try another rotation. So what about stone ball, rockfall, turbine? So stone ball plus rockfall plus turbine minus 3 times 5. And we're at 70. So again, that's a bit on the expensive side. I think I'm satisfied with 62 for now for 2 fake beard procs. So now let's go to 1 fake beard proc. So let's start off with the most expensive move we can use turn 1 would be stone ball. So 17, and we'll see if we can get a 3-move rotation with triple stone ball. Plus 34, and then we'll subtract 2 times 5. And I'll leave us at 75. So as we mentioned, 70, 72 were too expensive, so we won't go for this if we have 1 fake beard proc unless we absolutely need to. And we'll do 17 plus 1 stone ball, and then what about a turbine? Minus 2 times 5. So 64. That's not too much more investment, and there's a little bit of flexibility in here with clicking Feather Gatling instead, and maybe Rockfall instead here. So we'll stick around with that. 64. It's only 63 investment. It's not too bad. And I think that's probably good enough for 1 fake beard proc for this example. So let's go to 0 fake beard procs. So let's make sure we can do 2 stone balls at least. Minus, and then it would just be 5. So 63. Okay, nice. We've already hit it. And then let's try a different rotation. So stone ball into, what about Feather Gatling and a turbine? Minus 2 times 5. And we're at 67. So this is kind of an uncommon scenario, so maybe I don't necessarily want to calc for this. I'm at 64, and if I use 2 Feather Gatlings instead, I actually don't know X, I think. So let's test that. 34 plus 20 plus 20 minus 2 times 5. And yep, that hits 64. 64 seems like a pretty solid mark for this, and that'll be the stamina for Turok. Alright, now that we've found a good mark for the stamina on our Turok, let's look at speed. So this is the next step because I find it to be the next most certain thing to spread for. So how do I determine what speed I want? Well, go back to the 3 beginning questions, and you can kind of take them a step further with the below questions. Do I need my Tem to outspeed what it's supposed to be able to reliably beat them? And as well, is the goal of this Tem to be as bulky as possible? Because if so, if it's bulky, it doesn't have any high priority options, it's probably not going to outspeed anything, so it's much more reliable to build into bulk and just forego all speed. So basically, what I'm trying to get at is you want to reduce as many uncertainties as you reasonably can when you're spreading for speed. An example might be that you want Gialis to beat Wolfie. So you have it 1 speed ahead of max speed Wolfie, so it's always going to outspeed a Dust Vortex if there's no speed buffs on either Thames. Another thing you might want to consider is within your own team, you want to speed stagger for certain combos such as P-Jab, H-Slap, Stare, Purgation, Sparks, etc., so that it can combo with your other Tems to maximize the value you get out of these moves. In the description, I'm going to link a text file with the most relevant speeds to help give an idea of what Tems to be worried for or to look out for. Okay, next is a topic I would like to address that a lot of people like to or tend to get caught up in, which is speed creep. So speed creep basically is just creeping your speed ahead of certain breakpoints with the goal of outspeeding other people who try to reach the same breakpoint. So the example, going back to the Giaus and Wolfie, would be that my Giaus is 1 speed ahead of Wolfie, and maybe someone else decides, okay, well, a lot of people are going to be going for 1 speed ahead of Wolfie, so I'm going to go 2 speed ahead of Wolfie to outspeed their Gialuses. But then someone else can say, well, I'm going to go 3 speed ahead to outspeed the people who are trying to outspeed the people who are outspeeding Wolfie, and it just can keep going on and on and on up until max speed. And the main problem is that this reduces the certainty of your speed calc because you're starting to gamble on if you outspeed others who also creep ahead of your creep, and then if you crept the certain breakpoint and you don't outspeed anyways, you're just wasting TVs because you're putting TVs towards accomplishing a goal that isn't necessary to your game plan. So in conclusion, I think you would want to avoid speed creep most of the time, if not all the time, because you're very likely to be wasting stat points while not increasing your certainties. If you don't know if you'll outspeed something, it's generally much safer and consistent to assume you don't and play accordingly, unless, of course, you've seen during the course of the game that your Tem outspeeds theirs, then you know you do. Alright, so here I have the text file with most relevant speed tiers at level 100. I did not include Fat Burner because I don't think it's that good of an item. You're not going to see it on that many Tems. But, alright, so 2-Rock, starting off, is base speed of 60, so it's relatively slow. So the best chance we have at outspeeding things would be Turbine. So a couple of Tems to look for would be Mushuk. Maybe we want to outspeed a max speed Mushuk with Turbine, Hazrat, and looking through the list, probably Nidrasil. Nidrasil knocks tier speed. Alright, so the highest speed breakpoint we might want to hit would be Mushuk, which is max speed 297. So Turbine is going to be target nothing. So this will show us our effective speed. Turbine is going to be the 3 pile, and we want to try to make this go above 297. So we'll just add speed until we see this happen. Alright, so 185 investment. Now, I don't know if this is super worth for this spread, what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to decide, maybe I don't need to. Maybe it's not that common that people run a max speed Mushuk anyways. So this isn't the greatest thing to calc for. So what about Hazrat? It's a little bit slower. Well, 280 at 289. So I think the problem with this, though, is that we're still investing a good chunk of speed. We might as well go for Mushuk speed at this point. And 2-Rock pretty much always hard beats Hazrats because it's resistant to both stabs unless they're running Shaween's Horn. So maybe we don't need to beat Hazrat to outspeed it to beat it. But what about Nidrasil and Noxalotl? They're at 263 max speed. And it looks like 70 speed investment. This isn't too high, and this will guarantee that we outspeed them with Turbine, and a lot of the times they tend to be very bulky Tems. So they're going to tend to be 0 speed, so there's a good chance we outspeed their base anyways. But the important part is that Turbine will always outspeed. Now that we've finished our calcs on the speed and stamina, the next step I do is the defensive calcs. And this is probably going to be the most labor intensive or the longest and most important part of your calc. So how do we find the right starting bulk? This stage of spreading, though, is generally going to be very situational, and it ultimately comes down to feel. A way to help guide this direction, though, is to have an answer to those 3 starting questions, and more specifically, we want to consider, is this TEM more offensive or is it more defensive? How much bulk do I need to invest to make sure my TEM can reliably beat what I need it to beat? So if my TEM is more offensive, I'm probably only going to be able to live maybe 1 hard-hitting hit, while if it's more defensive, I might want to live larger combinations of attacks. So to start, try calcing always for more extreme damage scenarios, so you live attacks that have max damage boosts from max damage boosting items. And the reason you do this when you're calcing is it gives a cushion of error to where you live in the likely scenario that they don't have all of these damage boosts with maximum investment while not having to gamble on living. Sometimes, though, you're going to need to pick stuff you won't be able to live because it might just cost too much and might take too many TVs that you might want to invest in attack or other areas. So look specifically as well at lead combos you need to live. Accurately knowing or calculating for this, though, will come down to experience and from playing the game. So let's talk about min-maxing bulk, because I have not seen anyone really talk about this, but basically, after the very first point in HP, it's going to be 4 TVs on every single time in the game, regardless of the base stats. It's going to be 4 TVs for 1 stat point. And the same is true for defense and special defense. It's going to be 5 TVs for 1 stat point. And basically, HP, it gives you slight bulk overall in both sides, but defense and special defense investment give you a much larger chunk of bulk in that stat specifically. However, obviously the downside is it's going to one side. So to min-max, what we're going to do is we're going to try to find a point where we live the hits we need to live to accomplish our goal while minimizing the required TVs in bulk. So as a tip generally, and what I'm going to show in the example later, is that for bulky Tems that try to live a really heavy hitting attack, I just start with 500 HP and try to live said combo or attack and then minimize my investment around said combo. I'm going to pick one for the defensive side, one for the special defensive side. And before I go into the example, some things to note, and the experience feedback loop, which is very important for your defensive calcs, is remember, we do not want to sit in the damage calculator for too long trying to spec for everything and every single possible combo we can think of. Try to stick to immediate threats to your game plan. If we sit in the damage calc forever, we're not going to be getting the important feedback in game from combos we won't be able to realistically think of, and we're not going to be spending time playing the game to improve our play. So try to get out there to test spreads. There's not going to be one right spread. We're going to constantly tweak and improve it over time to try to make sure the TEM fits the exact purpose of what we need it for as best as it can. If you find, for example, a bit of this feedback you might get is that you barely die to some combo that you frequently run into, and you need to live this to accomplish your goal. So what you do is use this experience and try to put it back into your calc to live it. And I know this answer is somewhat open-ended. There's a lot of tweaking and playing around, and there's no right answer, honestly. But what you're going to try to do is use your culmination of experience to adjust your spread and improve your play. So now let's get into the example with J-Doragon. Alright, so before we get into spreading, I'm gonna show how exactly the stats work and how much of an impact sort of min-maxing has on your spread. And this is gonna be using basically what we're gonna calc for later, and it's gonna be Turok taking 2 plagues from Wolfie, and on the physical side, it's gonna be Gialis using hook kick and helicopter kick with max attack wardroom boost. I'm not going to share this resource because it's just for demonstration purposes and it's very slightly off because of rounding errors, but basically this red bar here is going to be your HP. This yellow bar is going to be how much damage the Gialis combo does. This green bar is going to be the damage the Wolfie combo does. So what we're going to try to see is make these two go below your HP so you're not dying from the hit. And this purple line is just how high your defense is, your special defense is, and this blue line is how high your defense is. Well, this line is the damage from Wolfie, this line is the damage from the Gialis combo, but varying with across all defensive investments. We can see as we invest more and more into defense, the value for each point and the damage reduction is going to start to steadily and steadily decrease until eventually it's going to hit an asymptote, or it's never going to go below 0, basically. Obviously, you only invest up to 500, but basically, this is true for defense and special defense. The difficult part of this is that HP investment, you only need 4 TVs for one stat, while the defenses you need 5. And we're going to try to find a point in here where we can minimize how many stats we have to use in total. So as a basic example, if I just go invest purely into defenses, the reason we don't do this is because you see it's roughly about this many TVs, around 355 to live, and around like another 300 to live on this side, and we're living this combo, but we're spending 700 TVs in bulk. While if I invest in HP first, I only have to invest a little bit in each to live this combo. And I've just decreased the amount of TVs required already by roughly 100. So that is the importance of min-maxing. There's many, many values where you can live this combo, and we're going to try to find the ones that minimize this investment. Alright, so now that I've showed how the stat works and why we want to min-max, or like the value of it, I'm going to do it on Turok. And trust me, it's not as hard as it might seem. I'm going to show a really basic, intuitive way to do it. So I need Turok, and then Wolfie. I'm going to split this up into 2 calcs, one from the Wolfie combo, and max special attack with Plague, both targeting Turok, and the other combo in this calc from Gialis. Both Gialis will have max attack, this one wardroom, and we're going to use helicopter kick, targeting the Turok, and on this one it's going to be hook kick, targeting Turok with wardroom as well, max attack. So this is the max damage this combo can do. And now, as I mentioned, a good tip starting point is going 500 HP. So you might notice here though that I still have maximum HP down here. If I take away just a couple of TVs, there we go. So I'm at 498, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this SPDF just to live the plagues. There we are at 83. So remember, 498, and I'm going to scale my defense up so I live this combo of attacks from Gialis. We're going to hit perform next and see I live on 1 HP. Perform next and see I live on 1 HP. So now what we can do is we add these numbers up to see what the total investment on bulk is. So 498 plus 12 plus 83. Right there, we're using 593 TVs to live these two separate combos of attacks. So to see this, how this works intuitively, what we're going to do is we're going to scale our special defense up by 1 stat. So we need less HP to live this combo. Right there, now it does 4 less damage. So I can remove 4 TVs in my HP. And I'm still living on 1 HP. So now bring 482 over here. And I'm going to boost my defense up just to live this combo of hits. And there we go. Now I'm living. So I'm going to add these up and see if I saved any TVs. So we have 482 plus 22 plus 88. And there you go. I used 1 less TV to live the same combos of hits. And you'll notice the math checks out. The reason we save 1 TV is because we only add 5 TVs in special defense and 10 TVs in defense to then need 16 less TVs in HP, netting us 1 more TV we can use elsewhere. And we can take this a bit further. So let's scale up our special defense a little bit more. And you'll see this point was less valuable because of rounding. So it only gives us 2 more points in HP. So I'm going to scale it down. 474. And let's check. 474. And I'm going to boost my defense up just a little bit. See if I live, which I do. Nice. So now it's at 474, 27, 93. 474 plus 27 plus 93. And we'll see, I lost 2 TVs now from my previous one. So this point isn't as efficient at living these combos of attacks. So basically what you want to do is find points where there's larger jumps in damage reduction. So now we'll see I increase it again, and there you go. I use 4 less TVs and 4 less points in HP to live this combo now. Live by 1, so I'm at 458. I need to scale this up. See, I do live. Let's check with 1 less, just in case I didn't overdo it. Okay, I did. 1 less, so we need 458, 32, 98. 458 plus 32 plus 98. We'll see, we just jumped into saving 6 more whole TVs from doing this. And we can push this even further and see, go to a point to where it's gonna start to increase the TVs we need to live. So we're gonna try to find the point where it minimizes this. So I'm gonna go up. That's only 1 TV saved. There's 2. So we'll try this point, 108, and I need to go down to 434. So 434 on this side. We want to also be looking at the Gala side too, seeing if we're getting large jumps in damage reduction. That's 3. It's only, oh, that's 4, so that's a large point. Do I live? I do, by a large margin. So 434, 47, 108. Is it 47? Yes. Plus 108. And we'll see. Well, unfortunately, we lost the TV in bulk, but the Yals had such a large jump that we're living by a very large margin. So we can actually reduce our HP by 3 to see if there's a mark on the Gialis side. So we need to go 422. And, oh, I gotta increase my special defense. Looks like I need another point, and now I'm living by yet again another significant margin. We'll test this. 422 plus 47 plus 118. And this totals to 587. So, I mean, I've gone back in the right direction. We'll keep pushing it. I need a lot less invest now to live this. So 410, 118. And on this side, it's going to be, I believe, 62. Yeah, let's try one less. Okay, so it's one less. 57. There you go. So 410, 57, 118. 410 plus 57 plus 118. And there we go. I saved another 2 TVs. Let's try this one more time. I'm going to push it one more step further, and then I'm going to show a whole series of just points for this. So there's only 1 point, but there's 2, so 128. Let's go down. There we go, we live by 1. 386. And it's not enough yet. That's 67. There we go, we live. 386, 67, plus 128. And there you go, we shaved off yet another 4 TVs. So that's the importance of doing this. You just slowly scale up your defensive TVs and try to find points of larger jumps and just see where you can save TVs. See if you can find points that use less. So I'm going to jump over to an Excel doc now that has a lot of these points labeled out. All right, so now that we're over in Excel, as you can see, I did 17 points of data, and this is the HP defense, special defense invest with the total investment here, as well as how much you live by on the combo, because sometimes you might want to pick from a couple of these, because these two give the same value, but this one is just a little bit bulkier, so it's a little bit more valuable to run this spread. And as you can see, I've graphed these, so it starts out where you're a bit less efficient. It reaches a point where you're more using less TVs for more bulk or the same bulk, and then it starts to go back up in the other direction again. So what you're doing is trying to run through these points and find one of these, and then use that for your spread. All right, so now that we've done our defense investments, I'm going to talk about what you want to invest in your attacks or your offensive investment. So, Mr. Doragon, how much attack should I run? Well, I think it's a trap. Similar to the reasoning behind speed creeping, I think it's a trap to invest for offensive breakpoints. An example might be to make sure my beta burst does 50% or more to a Yowler. And the reason I think this is mostly a trap is because the person using the Yowler can very easily just invest a little bit of bulk, a little bit of extra bulk, and now they live that. Well, now I can creep my damage a little bit higher to cover this case, but as you can see, we're running into the same speed creeping fallbacks where I'm starting to gamble on if I'm two-shotting stuff, and I don't want to rely on this in my spreads. I have a chart here with just my general rule of thumb for what amount of TVs you want to save in offense in this chart. So if your Tem is very offensive, you want to have roughly 400 plus TVs in attack. If your Tem is kind of bulkier but offensive, you're going to try to save 200 to 300-ish or more if you can afford it. And if you're going to be very tanky or a support, and that's your role, you're probably going to end up close to 0 in attack. So to demonstrate this, I've got the T-Rock spread out, and My HP, stamina, speed, defense, and special defense are all calced for. They're all set, and I've managed to save roughly 300 in that range of TVs for my bulky offensive Tems, and I'm gonna put all of that back into attack, and we're gonna scale it down to find if there's leftover TVs. So there we are, 283 with 3 remaining. So at this point, we've pretty much done everything, but you might have some leftover TVs. So if there's only a few, you might want to look through the stats for very small value points that in areas that are uninvested. So I'll show an example of this in a bit, but the things you can do with these are just throw the rest in attack and special attack if you haven't already done so. And if not, you might be able to just put it in HP. No, it's unlikely that you'll be able to use exactly 1000 TVs. It's okay to have 1 to 3 left over as long as you've accomplished the goal with your spread. And the remaining couple of TVs don't increase any of your stats. So what do I mean by these necessarily value points or increasing in a stat? Well, if we look in Ukama as an example, I'm going to look through the stats to see if there's a stat that only requires like 1 to 2 TVs to increase it. So currently I haven't found any, but, well, attack isn't useful, but this would be an example. There's only 1 TV for it. In defense, only 2. Special attack, 4, so it's not 5, but there we go. And in special defense, 1. So you can look for these value points in your Tems. For this spread, there aren't any. However, if we go back to the spreadsheet, we will see here that I'm saving 3 TVs. What I can do is notice that this has a little bit of extra bulk on the defensive side. I don't waste TVs then because this accounts for those 3 extra TVs. So I could run this bulk. I could also run this one instead and give up the TVs, those 3 TVs, and be very slightly more specialty defensive or very slightly more physically defensive. It's up to you. Doesn't make too much of a difference. But I'm just going to stick with this one for the spread. Alright, now pretty much finished the starting spread. So you're going to go into adjusting or modifying it in the future. So remember to use your experience. Talked about the experience feedback loop before, but don't be afraid to look at a spread that isn't meeting your goal and adjusting it. So think about how it's not fitting the goal. So if the Tem didn't outspeed a certain Tem that you really needed to, maybe it's barely dying to a specific combo, the damage might be slightly lacking, you can slightly adjust the spread, slightly tweak it, or just completely change it to try to fit these certain things. Ultimately, though, you must refine your spreads through playing and adjusting while building up your own game knowledge. It's disappointingly open-ended, but there's realistically limitless combinations of TVs, and there's not one correct answer. So, at that point, thanks for watching. Don't be afraid to ask any questions in the comments, or let me know what you think of the video, or how I might be able to improve, and I hope this was informative. See you.